What's going on, folks? And we're back. So, what's interesting is I've recently started kind of really getting into shooting suppressed. And one of the interesting things about shooting suppressed is when you go from shooting suppressed and then you go to shooting normally, you start to really hate the sound of a firearm. And I don't mean that overall. I mean just immediately. So when I'm on a range and I'm shooting suppressed for like half the range time, and then I go to a gun that doesn't have a suppressor and I shoot on it, and I shoot that gun, it drives me insane. And just, you don't realize how loud it is. And as one person put it, it's just noise pollution. That being said, what's really interesting is what suppressors do and how they affect firearms. I recently had my one of my favorite rifles is my HK MR556 SBR, which I call it my 416 clone. And what was interesting about it was I initially zeroed that particular rifle at about 50 yards with 55 grain 5.56, and didn't really have any issues. And that particular gun is a piston-driven system, and so it isn't adjustable though. The gas isn't adjustable, and when I say gas isn't adjustable, meaning like the amount of gas that comes from firing the bullet and how it's routed. Because as anybody knows, with an AR-15 system, it's pretty much run by the gas, the escaping gas of the bullet. And so initially when I was shooting the gun, I zeroed it in, didn't really have any problems. And when I recently took a Buck Doyle course, scope carbine course, at the end of one of the nights, I decided to bring my SBR out and do some shooting with it, and realized I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. I mean, my shots were everywhere. It was kind of disheartening a little bit, to be honest with you, just because it was a gun that I really cherish, a gun I really love, but I couldn't hit anything with it. And in part, it was because the gun was suppressed. And I think people undervalue and underestimate the dynamic of a gun and how it changes when you suppress it. And not only that, the type of ammo you use, how heavy it is, everything. And so it's so interesting to me how these small things when it comes to shooting don't seem very consequential, but then make such a huge difference in the way that the gun performs. Because I was thinking to myself, what could have been the issue? Well, I know the gun was overgassed, clearly, meaning that there was just way too much pressure, and it was pretty much abusing the gun and abusing the bolt, going back and forth, and then causing the gun to kind of eat itself alive in a sense. But I was still confused because I shot it before and I wasn't having any of these issues. So I did some more thinking, and then I went over to Modern Outfitters, and I had someone throw some brakes on some of the guns that I have, and I just kept thinking, and then I called a good friend of mine by the name of James, and then it clicked after talking with him, and it was the ammo. I was using the same ammo I was using for the Buck Doyle scope carbine course, where we were shooting out to 900 meters, and we were running 75 grain, and the ammo is incredibly hot. So versus the 55 grain ammo I was shooting before, where the load wasn't that hot, the gun was still overgassed, but that was compounded when I went to the even hotter load of the 75 grain. And that's what was causing my gun to pretty much just shoot sporadically all over the place. So long story short, the one thing that I love about the gun world and being involved in guns is you're never really ever going to get bored. And as many guns as I get my hands on and as many guns as I shoot, I've never flirted with the idea of being bored, because there's so many little things involved that you're constantly learning that you never really knew about. I thought you take a suppressor, you throw it on the gun and you're good. You start to understand that there's so many other things involved in it that could come across as a bit annoying. But when you really look at it and you approach it from the standpoint of, no, this is intriguing and it's interesting and it's me learning something new about something that I already love, I feel like I end up having the best of both worlds. Like, I will never be bored of guns. I just can't. There are just too many small intricacies and different components and assets to the guns that will continue to always be there, and things are always changing, and I absolutely love it. And I feel for anybody who's in an industry where they feel like they've mastered it to the point where there's nothing else to learn, because at that point, that's when boredom sets in, and the last thing I want to do is have a passion that I'm completely bored with. So I love the kind of new dynamic of running suppressed guns and figuring out how guns react, and it's going to create add a whole nother element to my gun review videos as well, because now it's like, guns act completely different suppressed when they're not suppressed. So now you have to talk about it from those two perspectives. So I think that's pretty freaking awesome personally. And I hope to continue to learn. I hope I never get to the point where I've mastered anything in this gun industry. And I will say, I planned on really getting into long distance shooting, and I've kind of started that journey. And taking the scope carbine course that I took with Buck Doyle was kind of the genesis of that at this point. I mean, I was tagging a target at 900 meters with a 16-inch AR-15 and 15 to 20 mile per hour winds, and still hitting the target. So there's something incredibly satisfying about being able to do that, and then just a learning process. I mean, I looked at it and approached it like I have homework to do when I go home after leaving this course, and I think that's the way it should be. So with that being said, that is it for Seeing Live today. I am Colion the War, and be sure to join us again Monday for another awesome show.